Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Design Thinking. In this presentation, we will be able to answer the following questions. First, what is design thinking? Next, what are the design thinking phases? Third, how can design thinking be applied in and benefit a Filipino company? And lastly, how can design thinking benefit Filipino society in general? To introduce the topic, let's first watch a video. Before going into what design thinking is, maybe we can take a look at the history of how design thinking came about. From design science in the 1960s, to design as a way of thinking in the 1970s, to looking at designerly ways of knowing in the 1980s, and finally, the first mention of design thinking in 1987. In the struggle to fully understand design, efforts were made to develop a science out of the field of design by applying scientific methodology and processes to understanding how design functions. Horst Rittel, a design theorist known for coining the term wicked problems, wrote and spoke extensively on the subject of problem solving in design. In 1970s, computer scientist and Nobel Prize laureate Herbert A. Simon was the first to mention design as a science or way of thinking in his 1969 book, Sciences of the Artificial. In 1982, Nigel Cross discussed the nature of designers' problem solving in his seminal paper, Designerly Ways of Knowing. Cross compared designers' problem solving to the non-design related problem solutions we develop in our everyday lives. Peter Rowe, then director of urban design programs at Harvard, published his book Design Thinking in 1987, which focuses on the way the architectural designer approaches his task through the lens of the inquiry. In 1991, IDEO was formed and showcased design process modeled on the work developed at the Stanford Design School. IDEO is widely accepted as one of the companies that brought design thinking to the mainstream, developing their own customer-friendly terminology. In 2005, design thinking is taught at the Stanford School of Design, or the D School. The D School, known today as the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design, has made the development, teaching, and implementation of design thinking one of its own central goals since its inception. Design thinking emerged, or should we say converged, out of the muddy waters of this chaos to combine the human, technological, and strategic needs of our times in a synthesis, which is still being explored today by those at the forefront of the field. Now let us proceed to knowing what design thinking is. Design thinking is the iterative process in which we seek to understand the user, challenge assumptions, and redefine problems in an attempt to identify alternative strategies and solutions that might not be instantly apparent with our initial level of understanding. It provides a solution-based approach to solving problems. It is also a way of thinking, working, and a collection of hands-on methods. Design thinking revolves around a deep interest in developing an understanding of the people for whom we're designing the products or services. Simply, design thinking is a philosophy and a set of tools that helps you solve problems creatively. Design thinking is differentiated from other processes because it is human-centered. It focuses on the human perspective by looking at the needs of the customer first. Now let's move on to the design thinking phases. There are 5 phases in design thinking: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. The first stage of design thinking process is to gain an empathic understanding of the problem you are trying to solve. This means consulting experts to find out more about the area of concern through observing, engaging, and empathizing with people to understand their experiences and motivations, and immersing yourself in the physical environment so you can gain a deeper personal understanding of the issues involved. This first phase that focuses on empathy is crucial to human-centered design process and allows design thinkers to set aside their own assumptions about the world. The second phase, define, involves analyzing your observation and synthesize them in order to define the core problems. In this phase, it is important that problems are defined as a problem statement in a human-centered manner. For example, instead of stating a problem in this way, we need to increase our food product market share among young teenage girls by 5%. It can be stated better in this manner. Teenage girls need to eat nutritious food in order to thrive, be healthy, and grow. In ideation phase, this is where designers start generating ideas based on the solid background built on phase 1 and 2. They start to think outside the box to identify new solutions to the problem statement. They also look for alternative ways of viewing the problem. It is important to get as many ideas as possible at the beginning of the ideation phase. In the prototyping phase, designers produce a number of inexpensive, scaled-down versions of the product or specific features found within the product to investigate the problem solutions generated in the previous stage. This is an experimental phase, and the aim is to identify the best possible solution for each of the problems identified during the first 3 stages. Solutions are implemented within the prototypes, and one by one, they are investigated and either accepted, improved, or re-examined. They can also be rejected on the basis of the user's experiences. By the end of this stage, the design team will have a better idea of the constraints inherent to the product and the problems that are present, and have a clearer view of how real users would behave, think, and feel when interacting with the end product. In the test phase, designers or evaluators rigorously test the completed product using the best solutions identified during the prototyping phase. Being an iterative, non-linear process, the results generated during the testing phase are often used to redefine one or more problems and inform the understanding of the users, the conditions of use, how people think, behave, and feel, and to empathize. It is important to note that the 5 stages are not always sequential. They do not have to follow any specific order, and they can often occur in parallel and repeated iteratively. As such, the stages should be understood as different modes that contribute to a project rather than sequential steps. To see more of the design thinking phases, let's watch another video.
A long time ago, if humans wanted to move something, we had to carry it. And as time went on, we were able to solve this problem and millions of others. In life, we're always bumping into new problems, and while we have the desire to solve them, it's often hard to find the right solution, or even know where to start. That's where design thinking comes in. Design thinking is a process that seeks to solve complex problems by approaching it from the user's perspective. It also aims to turn your ideas into tangible, testable products as quickly as possible. The design thinking framework can be drilled down into 3 distinct phases: immersion, ideation, and implementation. But if we zoom in a little bit, these phases can be broken down into 5 actionable stages that make up the entire design thinking process: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. In the empathize stage, you'll get to know your target audience and paint a clear picture of who the users are, what challenges they face, and what they need. This can be achieved through interviews, user testing, surveys, basically by talking to people and understanding how they think, act, and feel. Based on what you learn, you'll then define your problem statement. When creating your problem statement, focus on the user's needs over the business goals. Keeping it human-centered is the theme here. This problem statement will act as your North Star. If you start to trail off or get lost, just look back to the problem statement to refocus. With our problem statement defined, we're ready to ideate. Keep in mind, innovation is rarely born in isolation. So don't fly solo. Get up from your desk, cubicle, or spaceship, gather some key individuals from other teams, and collaborate. The name of the game is quantity over quality. So think outside of the box and explore new angles. There are many ideation techniques to get you and your team started. A great reference is our Design Thinking Handbook by Eli Woolery. Check it out at designbetter.com. Next stop, prototyping. Prototypes come in all shapes and sizes, from basic paper models to interactive digital mock-ups. The goal is to have something tangible that can be tested on real people. Getting your prototype into the hands of real users will give you great insight on if the solution you provided is valid or if it needs some more work. Based on their feedback, you can make changes and improvements before spending the time and money building the real thing. Although these steps appear to be sequential, keep in mind, design thinking is less linear and more iterative. At each stage, you'll most likely discover new things that require you to go back and repeat a previous step. And there you have it, design thinking in a nutshell. Now get out there and start applying design thinking to your work today. You'll be glad you did. For more information on design thinking, head on over to envisionapp.com/inside design, and we'll see you in the next video.
Let's go to part 3, application of design thinking to Filipino companies. For our first example, we have Meralco. An example of design thinking is Meralco's experience in developing a utilities management app. They used a design sprint, which is a process for answering critical business questions through design, prototyping solutions to those problems, and testing those solutions with real end users, in most cases, the customers. This framework makes use of design thinking and user experience methodologies in a time-constrained process. The sprint process is split into 5 phases, namely understand, diverge, converge, prototype, and test. First phase would be to understand. The team went through several exercises such as expert interviews and customer journey mapping. The goal of this phase is to gain a deeper understanding of the problem that they were trying to solve. In this phase, the team was able to define their long-term goal. Meralco will be seen as a help, an ally in managing consumption and even the household. The sprint question that guided the output of the project was also defined. How might we deliver information at the right time that improves people's lives in a delightful way? The team was also able to decide on the project objective at this stage. Design goal is to create a solution that could help customers avoid bill shock. Phase 2 is diverge. The goal of this stage is to explore, develop, and iterate creative ways of solving the problem regardless of feasibility. Some activities done on this stage include a rapid ideation, wherein the team was instructed to come up with as many ideas as they could within 5 minutes, and also a paper prototyping, a fast and cost-effective way to imagine how the user interface might look like. Phase 3 is converge. The goal here is to identify the most feasible ideas from the ideas generated on the previous phases and identify them further. Activities in this phase include Idea Museum, which is reviewing the initial solutions created, heat map voting, wherein members of the team voted on features they liked about their fellow members' sketches and diagrams. Then a decider vote will take place, wherein a person which has the most tangible exposure to the problem trying to be solved decides. Once the final feature is chosen, storyboarding takes place. A storyboard maps out each step of the experience to ensure alignment on what goes into the prototype and that there is the right feature to accommodate each step of the user journey. A user test flow determines the flow of user actions into a step-by-step instruction list for the storyboard. Phase 4 is prototype. The prototype created is an app that will allow Meralco postpaid users to track their consumption and receive notifications if their usage spikes or if there are any outages in the area. Users will be notified when they're approaching their budget limit that they've set in the app. The user can also get actionable insights based on behavior to manage energy consumption. Then the last step is testing. The team tested the prototype on 10 potential users that match the target user profile. Feedback from the tests are noted and grouped by trend. These insights were synthesized using the RITE, Rapid Iterative Testing and Evaluation method. In this method, the team iterates on the design as soon as issues are discovered by 1 or 2 participants. Benefits of design thinking includes having cross-functional team work together on a problem, gathering ideas to create unified ideas, testing the product on a variety of actual customers, prioritizing ideas and creating a prototype very quickly, and iterating immediately based on user feedback. The key learning of Meralco from the sprint was that customers would be delighted to receive regular notifications about their energy consumption from Meralco, which answers the hypothesis that the team sought out to prove. There is no guarantee that Meralco will release the same app as the prototype that was put together, but this process enabled them to understand their customers more and gave them a chance to build, test, and iterate an idea. Some other examples in the Filipino design thinking space includes creating mobile banking services for the unbanked. In 2014, BPI Globe Bank Co., the Philippines' first mobile phone-based savings bank, and the global humanitarian agency Mercy Corps teamed up with IDEO.org to design financial products to help Filipinos hit by the Typhoon Haiyan and Typhoon Yolanda. The partnership provided relief for tens of thousands of survivors through mobile savings accounts, giving survivors of the typhoon the ability to save money securely for the first time and to access cash transfers. Another application of design thinking is in showing empathy in education. We have here Habi Education Lab. Habi Education Lab is a design and research group that works on early childhood education to adult learning and development. This education lab envisions an education sector that leverages empathy, learning science, data, and design thinking for continuous improvement and innovation. So far, they've worked on projects in teacher development, innovation boot camps, and designed nationwide materials for Filipino public schools. Another use of design thinking is in social innovation. We have Carabella Dairy, Ant Hill, and Mad Travel. Carabella Dairy is a social enterprise that produces dairy products from Carabao's milk. They also partner with Carabao farmers in Bulacan. Ant Hill Fabric Gallery partners with local indigenous communities across Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao to create beautifully hand-woven products including fabrics, accessories, handbags, and dolls. Mad Travel is a social tourism platform which offers travel packages that involve meaningful experiences with marginalized communities in the Philippines. Design thinking is seen in these businesses as they do not just produce products or services for the satisfaction of the consumers, but are also created to support marginalized groups by partnering and working with them. This is the human-centered element of design thinking. The inspiration involves the marginalized communities and their struggles. The ideation focuses on finding out creative means to help them through employment, and the implementation stage tackled the concrete steps that will be taken. Design thinking even goes beyond the usual operations of the business itself and zooms further into how empathizing with stakeholders can bring about certain issues and with it, simple and innovative solutions. For the last part, let's now tackle the benefits of design thinking to the Filipino society. Before diving into how design thinking can benefit Filipino society, it would be good to highlight that design thinking incorporates constituents or consumer insights, in-depth and rapid prototyping, all aimed at getting beyond the assumptions that block effective solutions. Design thinking, inherently optimistic, constructive, and experiential, addresses the needs of the people who will consume a product or service and the infrastructure that enables it. Thus, design teams use design thinking to tackle ill-defined or unknown problems because they can reframe this in human-centric and outside-the-box ways and focus on what's more important for users. What are these wicked problems? The term wicked problem was first coined by Horst Drittel, a design theorist and professor of design methodology at the Ulm School of Design, Germany. Wicked problems are problems with many interdependent factors making them seem impossible to solve. Because the factors are often incomplete, in flux, and difficult to define, solving wicked problems requires a deep understanding of the stakeholders involved and an innovative approach provided by design thinking. Complex issues such as healthcare and education and socio-cultural concerns are examples of wicked problems. Let's look at an example of a wicked problem that turned into a story of a missed opportunity. In an area outside Hyderabad, India, between the suburbs and the countryside, a young woman fetches water daily from the always open local borehole that is about 300 feet from her home. She uses a 3-gallon plastic container that she can easily carry on her head. Shanti and her husband rely on the free water for their drinking and washing, and though they've heard that it's not as safe as the water from the Neandi Foundation Community Treatment Plant, they still use it. Shanti's family has been drinking the local water for generations, and although it periodically makes her and her family sick, she has no plans to stop using it. Why won't Shanti use the water from the foundation when there seems to be no reason not to? The center is within easy walking distance of her home, roughly a third of a mile. It is also well known and affordable, roughly 10 rupees or 20 cents for 5 gallons. Being able to pay the small fee has even become a status symbol for some villagers. Shanti is foregoing the safer water because of a series of flaws in the overall design of the system. Although Shanti can walk to the facility, she can't carry the 5-gallon jerrycan that the facility requires her to use. The plastic rectangular container is simply too heavy. The container isn't designed to be held on the hip or on the head. Shanti's husband works in the city and does not return home until after the water treatment center is closed. The treatment center also requires them to buy a monthly punch card for 5 gallons a day, far more than what they need. The designers of the center missed the opportunity to design a better system because they failed to consider the culture and needs of all the people living in the community. This concern could have been helped by design thinking. In an article published in the Inquirer in June 2020, the writer stressed the global pandemic of 2020 has changed almost everything for everyone. Literally, everyday businesses, schools, services are having to retool, rethink, and repurpose their very existence to address the challenges of daily survival and long-term sustainability. We look around and ask though, where do we even begin? If the answers were easy to find, then this pandemic would be nothing more than a large bout with a cold. But sadly, we have to reassess and look back at the frameworks and methodologies in the hopes of leveraging this for an uncertain future. After almost 2 years of this global situation and a seeming slow improvement within the Philippines, the pandemic truly revealed the broken systems and processes in the country, plus exposed needs and problems that may need the process of design thinking to be fully solved in the healthcare system, transportation, the distribution of ayuda, and even the transition to cashless transactions for the majority of Filipinos in the Class CD sector. The writer of the article proposes that perhaps design thinking may be the best route to go in this new normal. As Mr. Jack Garcia, Inquirer Design Thinking resource person states, fortunately, some frameworks are far more future-proof than others, such as design thinking and human-centered design. Design thinking challenges us to reframe problems and develop solutions and innovations, taking into consideration the human perspective. And now more than ever, we have to look at human behavior to guide our business solutions. What are the 4 ways to leverage design thinking to navigate the new normal? First, determine the underlying needs. We don't simply ask ourselves what is the problem, we dig deeper. We get to understand not just the business but the customer and the stakeholders. We make an effort to really understand their root motivations, aspirations, and deepest desires. We ask, what do they really need? Second, take a look at jobs to be done. This means looking not at the work job, but the goal job, the result of a successful process or journey through a problem and discovering underlying needs being satisfied by the solution. Next, ideation and prototyping. Design thinking espouses exploring multiple options. It's not being afraid to try and, more importantly, building upon the learnings derived from testing possible solutions in their low-resolution form. Lastly, optimism. Design thinking is very optimistic and positivist framework. It always asks how might we, political and social landscape, what we need to change first is not what we do, but the thought of how we will change the world. Design thinking is a mindset. And in this uncertain and changing economic, political, and social landscape, what we need to change first is not what we do, but the thought of how we will change the world.